Today, we are jumping into a decade so full of energy and change that they called it the Roaring Twenties. We're talking about the 1920s in America, a wild 10-year ride of booming businesses, brand new technology, and massive cultural shifts that totally reshaped how people lived their lives.
So, the big question is, how did this even happen? How did America go from the tough years of World War I into this decade-long explosion of energy and new ideas, seemingly overnight? Well, let's break it down. Here's how we're going to tackle it. First, we'll look at the economic boom that fueled everything. Then we'll see how the automobile changed America's landscape. After that, we'll dive into the new shared culture, explore some huge social shifts, investigate the complete disaster that was Prohibition, and finally, see how the whole party came to a crashing halt. All right, first up, the money. To really get the roar in the Roaring Twenties, you have to understand the incredible economic engine that was powering the whole decade. So, after World War I ended, American factories, which were untouched by the fighting, flipped a switch. They went from making military gear to making cool new things for everyday people, stuff like radios and vacuum cleaners. At the same time, people were making more money than ever before, and they were really excited to spend it. This combo just kicked everything into high gear.
But how did they make all this new stuff so fast and so cheap? The secret sauce was a game-changing idea called mass production. Perfected by Henry Ford, the concept was actually pretty simple. Instead of one person building a whole car, a moving belt, the assembly line, brought the car parts to the workers. Each person did just one small specific job over and over again. It made building things unbelievably fast and efficient.
And the results were just staggering. Let's take the Ford Model T. Thanks to that assembly line, the price plummeted from over $800 all the way down to under $300. All of a sudden, owning a car wasn't just some fantasy for rich people, it was something a normal family could actually afford.
Now, even at $300, a car was still a huge purchase. So how did people manage it? With another revolutionary idea, the installment plan. You can think of it as the original buy now, pay later. You'd put a small amount of money down, drive the car home that day, and then pay off the rest in small monthly chunks. It completely changed the game, letting people own big, expensive things right away.
And this brings us right to the automobile, because once cars became affordable for almost everyone, they didn't just change how people got around, they completely remade the entire country. The impact here was like a massive chain reaction. Think about it. More cars on the road meant you needed more paved roads and highways. Then gas stations and repair shops started popping up everywhere to service them. People could now live farther from their jobs in new communities called suburbs. Families could take weekend road trips for fun. And all of this created a ton of jobs in industries like steel, rubber, and glass.
But it wasn't just roads and cities that were changing. For the first time ever, new technologies were connecting people all across the country, creating one single shared American culture. You see, before the 1920s, what you listened to and talked about was mostly local, but the radio completely changed that. Now, a family in a small town in Ohio and a family in New York City could huddle around their radios and listen to the exact same news, the same music, and the same baseball game all at the exact same time. It was a powerful new way of feeling connected. At the same time, Hollywood was absolutely exploding. And then, in 1927, movies began to talk. The first talkie hit theaters, and almost overnight, silent films became a thing of the past. Movie stars weren't just actors anymore. They were national celebrities who set the trends for what was cool in fashion and hairstyles.
So, what was the soundtrack to all this change? It was jazz. This new style of music born out of African American communities was energetic, unpredictable, and perfect for dancing. It was the absolute perfect sound for a decade that was all about breaking old rules, which is why the 1920s are still called the Jazz Age.
Well, with all this new money, new technology, and new culture, it's no surprise that society itself started to change in some really dramatic ways, especially for women and African Americans. This era really saw a clash between the old and the new, and you can see it perfectly in the changing image of women. The traditional expectation was for women to have long hair and stay at home. But then came the flapper. Flappers cut their hair into a short bob, wore shorter dresses, earned their own money in city jobs, and went out to parties without a chaperone. They were a symbol of a new kind of freedom. At the exact same time, another massive social change was happening. It was called the Great Migration. This was a movement where millions of African Americans left the rural South,
heading to northern industrial cities like Chicago and Detroit to find better-paying factory jobs and to escape the harsh discrimination they faced. And this huge movement of people led to an incredible cultural boom. In places like the Harlem neighborhood of New York City, it kicked off the Harlem Renaissance, an amazing period of creativity where black artists, musicians, and writers expressed a new sense of pride and identity.
But not every major change in the 1920s was a step forward. In fact, there was one huge social experiment that backfired in a spectacular way.
In 1920, the U.S. government passed prohibition, which made it illegal to make, sell, or even transport alcohol. The goal was to make America a better, healthier place and reduce crime. The result, though, was the exact opposite.
So, did people actually stop drinking? Oh, not at all. Not even close. Instead, a whole secret world popped up overnight. Hidden, illegal bars called speakeasies opened in basements and back rooms all over the country. You'd often need a secret password just to get in the door. So instead of lowering crime, Prohibition created a massive, illegal black market for alcohol. It turned tons of otherwise normal citizens into lawbreakers. And worse, it made gangsters like Al Capone incredibly rich and powerful, leading to a huge spike in organized crime. The whole thing was a complete failure. For a decade, the Roaring Twenties felt like a party that was just never going to end. But it did. And when it stopped suddenly, and it was a catastrophe. All that economic excitement had led people to pour money into the stock market, pushing prices way higher than they were actually worth. It was a giant bubble, and in October of 1929, that bubble burst. Everyone panicked and tried to sell their stocks at once. The market completely crashed, wiping out billions of dollars overnight. Banks failed, factories shut their doors, and the Roaring Twenties screeched to a halt, kicking off the Great Depression.
So, the decade ended in disaster, but you can't deny its legacy. The big ideas it introduced, like mass production, affordable cars, suburbs, and a shared national media, are still the building blocks of the world we live in now. So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. Of all those roaring innovations, which one do you think has had the biggest impact on your life today?